Canada has an immigration problem, and it's no secret that it needs to be solved now. It feels like our government is intentionally making things worse through bad policy and bad moves that they are making. And it continues to deteriorate our standard of living as well as social cohesion and the overall cost of living for Canadians. Now, what is happening in Europe is a dramatic change and could be setting the tone for the entire Western world. They have a ton of parallels to us over there, things that they are dealing with, specifically Denmark, but it is spreading to other nations. Canada could really learn from this, and I think we should implement a lot of these practices. That being said, our foreign student and international student problem that we have is almost exclusive to Canada, so it's not mentioned in this video, as well as we are painting with a broad brush just to get the points across. Of course, all things are individual, but stick around to the end of this video. The points they made were so important, so interesting. Let's get into it.
In the past decades, immigration to the EU has skyrocketed. With millions pouring in every year, there seems to be no end in sight. Yet Denmark, the Scandinavian welfare state, seems to have found the solution. Zero asylum, send them back to Syria. Claims should be sorted somewhere else. In any other European country, this will be labeled as far-right and racist, but in Denmark, it has become the political center. Only 1,500 people applied for asylum in Denmark in 2020, a 57% drop from the previous year and the lowest number since the 1990s. In the same year, Sweden recorded 13,000 asylum claims.
So that's really interesting because I think it just shows, like, if you are incentivizing or disincentivizing these claims, which often can turn out to just be economic migrants, then you can see the difference. People aren't even going to Denmark to make the claims because they see, okay, you know, it's not worth it. And then Sweden's system gets abused.
Denmark, renowned for being polite and progressive, is profoundly skeptical of asylum seekers. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen of the center-left Social Democrats has set a target of 0 people arriving in Denmark outside the UN resettlement system. Yet Denmark was the first to sign and ratify the UN Refugee Convention in 1951 with its core principle of non-refoulement, that refugees should not be returned to a country where they would face serious threats, even at the expense of the country keeping them.
Okay, couple pieces of context there that are important. What they are saying is they won't accept illegal immigrants who are crossing the border illegally and then asking for asylum. You can't just come to their borders through a random ship and say, we need asylum, we're here. What they're saying is claim asylum, do it through the official channels so that we can vet you. All they're asking is that process be followed. I think that's very normal. And then again, when they're saying they were the first ones who signed this agreement that said we are not going to send back refugees if being the big word, they are not safe to go back, because yes, that is the whole point of the refugee system. They come to this nation for refuge to be safe while that's going on. We're going to get into that more later, but I just wanted to set that context. They are still accepting refugees, just through official channels. This, whatever that like is, it must be a program thing, but they still are accepting people and respecting the refugee claims, which is important.
Until 30 years ago, the country was relatively open, with strong protections for asylum seekers and refugees. But that started to change in the 1990s, as the people began feeling the impacts of mass migration, and an anti-immigrant backlash pushed the right-wing Danish People's Party into power. From this immigration crisis, Danes realized that Denmark's success was a result of its homogeneity, and that protecting the welfare state required protecting Danishness. Political figures on the right started saying that refugees should eventually be sent back to their home countries, and the Danish people overwhelmingly supported this.
That people who come to Denmark shall not be permitted to stay in Denmark indefinitely. And second of all, we would like to say to these people who are coming to Denmark that they should not calculate on staying in Denmark at all. We would like to refer these people to countries in the vicinity of the country where they fled. We're not interested in getting a whole lot of people who we're supposed to integrate, but we know as a fact that it is impossible to integrate these.
Originally painted
Again, context is important there. What they're saying is, hey, if you're a refugee, you're a refugee. This is a temporary situation, so build your life as if you're going back to your home. And what I don't understand is these people need to rebuild their homes, because when the event that happens that leads to them needing to leave originally, the idea is not like, oh, we're bailing on that entirely and we'll never come back. The idea is, once it's safe for you to go back and rebuild, you go back and rebuild. And the opportunity that these people have would actually be better for their countries in the long term. Because let's say you came over to a country, you were able to work, you were able to build some sort of savings and income while you were there, build some sort of wealth, potentially, depending on how long you are here, and then go back where your wealth is going to take you so much further and then help rebuild. So now you're taking the welfare and all of the opportunity that was given you here, bring it back to the country that you came from, and you can help rebuild in a positive way. So those are the situations where I think, guys, take this opportunity, go back, and then make it better.
As a far-right rhetoric, it became widely accepted by other parties as it became evident that the Danish people would only support parties that would oppose mass immigration and protect native interests. Europe's influx of refugees in 2015 and 2016 helped turn talking points into law.
See, guys, that's all it takes. The politicians don't actually make their platforms. They see what they're going to get voted in on. And that's why often, most of the time, they're running on free money, what they're going to give away that's free. So as sentiment starts to turn and people see what they're okay with and what they're not okay with, the government is always going to bend to the people because they just want to get voted in again.
In 2015, the Danish parliament introduced a new temporary protection status that could be withdrawn when conditions in home countries improve even slightly. This will get rid of many unwanted immigrants seeking asylum on dubious claims, as well as economic migrants who are draining taxpayer coffers. In 2016, the government granted authorities the right to confiscate the jewelry and valuables of new arrivals to fund their stay, alleviating the strain on hard-working Danish taxpayers. The introduction of anti-ghetto laws also sought to limit the number of non-Danish people living in certain neighborhoods, both to ensure the safety of peaceful Danish people and to protect Danish culture.
So that's been a big thing. Sweden's crime rate has skyrocketed, which is a bit interesting. But one of the other things that I think is important is when you do have these highly socialist countries, they only work if everybody's traveling the same direction. So if you start bringing, because they always, socialists here always use, well, what about these other countries? It's like, yeah, everybody's going the same direction and working together. It's a team thing. That's the only way you're going to get that to work. And so when you start to bring in these mixed cultures and everybody starts pulling their own way, it's a wagon that has to be pulled one way for that system to work.
But why does Denmark not have to follow the ridiculous EU policies regarding immigration? Denmark holds opt-outs from European Union policies in relation to police and justice. They were secured under the Edinburgh Agreement in 1992 after a referendum for the ratification of the EU was rejected by Danish voters. These opt-outs were given as a package of measures to assuage concerns raised during that referendum in order to get Denmark to join the EU. As a result, Denmark is not bound by the same commitments as other EU member states, thus rendering certain policy options legally possible in Denmark, which would not be permissible in other EU nations. Even as the number of immigrants pouring into Europe increases, Denmark's main party, the Social Democrats, has adopted an even harsher approach to immigration. While still in opposition in 2018, the party called for a reform of Denmark's asylum system, including creating reception centers outside Europe. They aim for a future where it will not be possible for refugees to obtain asylum in Denmark, protecting Denmark from the spike in crime, among other problems, that neighboring countries like Sweden have.
So again, that's huge, because if you have extra designated points where you have more time for background checks, you have more time for actually making sure that these people are making the proper claims that they're supposed to be doing, and that it's not just an economic claim, because that's what's happening all the time. We are seeing it obviously in Italy and all these other like Southern European countries where they're coming in on the boats and they're saying, oh, we need asylum, but it's just economic claims. So it's interesting that they want to have the ports and all of those zones off their actual soil and then bring people there after.
The Social Democrats have been implementing policies to make this a reality since the Danish people elected them in 2019. a new law enabling Denmark to deport asylum seekers outside Europe while applications are being processed is the latest in the series of measures implemented by the Social Democrats to stop immigrants from flooding into Denmark. Under the new law, which was comfortably passed by Denmark's parliament in a vote of 70 to 24, asylum seekers would be flown to a faraway third country regardless of where they are from. This move faced heavy criticism by the European Commission, yet enjoyed almost unanimous support from the Danish people.
Yeah, I don't understand how that's ever been controversial to say, hey, you guys came from this nation, come here for asylum, we'll re-find another nation that's more similar to your culture, somewhere that you can be seamlessly integrated, it's similar there, and you guys can get set up, and it's closer to home so that when things do die down again, they can get back to their normal lives, hopefully, and again, like I said, help rebuild.
Displaying the globalist agendas these multinational organizations hold. Another multinational organization, the United Nations Committee Against Torture, has expressed concerns about Denmark's ambitions to transfer asylum seekers to third countries like Rwanda, citing worries about the safety of migrants. The committee criticized Denmark 2 weeks after the UK Supreme Court said Rwanda could not be considered a safe third country, blocking Britain's similar plans for transferring asylum seekers to Rwanda. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak proceeded to pass an emergency law to declare Rwanda a safe destination for migrants, bypassing these pathetic attempts. The Danish case offers a vivid example of how the will of the people can triumph over the sinister manipulations of the cosmopolitan elites. Denmark demonstrates the beauty of democracy, that it is ultimately up to the people to decide if they want masses of immigrants flooding into their country.
First of all, I've heard that Rwanda is safe. It's beautiful. I've actually seen a lot of people traveling there for trips now. Just straight up for tourism. I've heard it's actually become a lot safer of a country. Google that first, because I might be misinformed. But to say that it's not safe for these migrants, from what I understand, it's very safe, and evidently it's been deemed safe. I just, don't know why they would say that.
And Denmark may preview where the EU is headed as the 27-nation bloc warily watches rising migration numbers while experiencing strong anti-immigration backlash. The globalist organizations such as the Refugee and Migrant Rights Division of Human Rights Watch have labeled Denmark's sensible policies racist, duplicitous, and hypocritical. In a statement, Denmark's Minister of Immigration and Integration claps back, calling the characterization offensive and lacking the seriousness that is required when talking about the government's policies. The government's goal is not zero asylum, he said, but zero people arriving through unofficial channels. Refugees should come to Denmark through the UN resettlement system, where they will be selected on the basis of humanitarian criteria. In the past 3 years,
I think that makes a ton of sense. They're basically saying, hey, there's nothing wrong with what we need to do. We just want more structure to it. We want more organization, and we want more accountability. We want to make sure we know who's here, how long they're going to be here for. Basically, it just comes down to structure. They're treating it more like a business, like an actual business, not like a government like Canada's, who's just saying like, yeah, the borders are open, Canadian citizenship means nothing, just dump in, pour in, we don't care. Like, especially with that new group that is fighting for just all current illegal immigrants to just get PR and status right away. Oy.
Denmark has been prudent when selecting refugees, extensively vetting them and performing background checks to ensure the safety of native Danes. As a result, Denmark accepted fewer than 250 refugees through the UN resettlement system. The UN Refugee Agency has been critical of Denmark's approach, condemning Denmark for putting its own citizens above refugees from other countries. They state that it was never the intention that refugees were to be subjected to constant reassessments once their protection needs had first been established. Danish authorities are also considering deporting settled refugees back to Syria, as the Damascus area and 2 other regions are safe.
So the Syria one's a really interesting one, because it's hard to paint with a broad brush, because you've got tons. I can't remember how many we got during that time. It was tens of thousands. And I personally have met some absolute sweethearts who have come to Canada Their intentions were to build businesses, hire people, pay taxes, become economically productive. Those are the people who like do the individual vetting. If we've got a business owner who's hiring people and he's starting multiple locations and he's doing all this stuff, that's the kind of stuff that we need, of course. And that's the people who have earned their stay. In this situation where it's become safer again, things are really starting to die down. They also need population. They've lost people through all of the events that have happened. That have been spread all over the world, and they need to be able to rebuild. We know, and they always say immigration is good. It helps build, it helps grow the population. Let's grow the population of the countries they came from.
This makes these refugees economic migrants and an unnecessary drain of taxpayer dollars. Syrian refugees considered for deportation are housed in open facilities, located in rural locations to keep them away from Danish society. Because Denmark has opted out of many of the EU's immigration and asylum rules, not all its policies are replicable. But the country's hardline policies, its introduction of temporary protection, and its focus on its natives have echoed across the continent. European nations could emulate Denmark's success in handling migration. More than 5 million migrants entered the EU in 2023. This situation is unsustainable, only barely sustained at the expense of the native taxpayers. There must be change. Many policymakers in Europe, like Alexander Dobrindt, a German MP, consider Denmark a model of successful asylum policy. Key to Denmark's efforts to control irregular migration has been the immediate deportation of rejected asylum seekers, contrary to other European countries who let them linger around for months or even years.
Yeah, that's not safe or good for anyone, because even the people who are caught lingering in that limbo, that's no good for them. They can't build, they can't figure out what's next, and then their only options are to get into things that will make things potentially worse for everybody, the community. And again, we do, of course, need to protect native populations because it becomes a triage issue. We know that natural-born Canadians right now are struggling to pay their bills. They're struggling with groceries. Inflation is getting worse. And then, same thing in Europe. Economically, Europe is not doing well. Economically, Canada is not doing well. We are in a recession, especially with the recent numbers that have been announced. It's the oxygen mask theory. You have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first so that you can help the person beside you. And what's going to happen is if all these nations don't continue to help ourselves, help rebuild, we're going to be doing so poorly that we're not even able to help anyone anymore. And it's going to become that we are basically the ones passed out in the seat because we didn't put on our oxygen mask in the airplane. And then everybody is worse off.
Causing all sorts of troubles for the natives. For example, it is already the case in Germany that those whose asylum applications are rejected are ordered to leave within a short time. However, the problem lies in the country's failure to carry out deportations, blamed on legal and practical hurdles. This led the German government last year to introduce tougher laws aimed at more effective returns. European countries must be able to make a distinction between those fleeing war and persecution who actually need asylum and people migrating for economic reasons. Those two groups should not be treated equally. Above all, European countries must place native interests first. Just like the Danes, who have protected their Danishness, European nations must place emphasis on protecting their own cultural identity before it is snuffed out by the waves of immigrants pouring in.
It's the same thing in Canada. The only way a country can be successful is if they have a cohesive social structure, everybody's on the same page, and we are generally trying to get in the same direction. So it's really interesting to see this major shift in Europe, especially because of their economic woes. We are going to be getting smoked here as well, especially because of the tax. So don't forget to get your Axe the Tax merch. Buy it in the link below. I'm a real estate agent in London, Ontario. Reach out to me if you want to work with me and my team all the way across Canada. Thank you guys so much for watching. Do not forget to like and subscribe, and have a great rest of your day.